So, bonjour, ciao, guten tag, hola, privyet, hello, and welcome. It's lovely to be here and lovely to have you all here with me. So, in early June 2014, I woke up just as dawn was breaking, and the headache that I had thought was dehydration was now unbearable. So much so that even the faint light of dawn was too bright. My two tiny daughters watched as emergency services came, the ambulance came and took me to hospital. 2 months later, I was finally discharged. I came home with a Zimmer frame, emotional instability, no memory for the previous 3 months. I had a diagnosis, first of meningitis and then of encephalitis. I had been an English teacher, but I couldn't carry on with that job anymore. I had to retrain. And as I began to rebuild my brain, I discovered and then trained in Scrum and then Agile. I studied psychology and now I'm studying neuroscience. I tried to find balance and I grew my understanding. I began to notice my biases, my destructive behaviors, and the psychological blockers that were getting in my way. So let me formally introduce myself. Hello, I'm Ceri and I like brains. Okay, let's calm things down for a minute with, this is a manatee, a sea cow, a calm animal to guide us forwards. Why are we here? Well, my language shaped my mindset when I was on my path to recovery. And what helped me, I noticed, also helped my team when things got hard. And I noticed that there were 3 key language and mindset shifts that I used that helped me to attain my goals. So today we're going to look at the effect that how we frame our goals has on our responses to motivation and obstacles. We're going to look at our automatic responses to situations and cues as a second point. And then thirdly, we're going to look at the unkind ways that we trip ourselves up and how we can begin to work with our inner critic. And these things are important because how you think about your goals and how you plan to achieve them affects your chance of success. Now, there are 2 ways that we can approach our life and our work. Let's look at those. We can either aim to be good at something, or we can aim to get better. Now, if we aim to be good at something, we're trying to show our ability. Our skill becomes the thing that validates us. We think to ourselves, being good at this proves that I am a good person. Our perfect performance becomes the proof of our ability, and how well we do is tied to our sense of self-worth. If, on the other hand, we aim towards being better, then our focus is on growth. We're developing and mastering skills, not just demonstrating them. And there's no connection with our ability or our performance and our sense of self-worth. Now, this fixed mindset is surprisingly common in Agile teams. We think about team development, but aside from occasional meetings with managers, there's less focus on how our individual improvement contributes to the success of the team. But beyond skills and certifications, our behavior and our belief systems shape the whole team. Now, fixed goals can be useful, just not so much in individual development. And that's what we need for high-performing teams. So let's look at this in more detail. Take the goal to be happy. Now, studies have shown that the more highly you value happiness as a goal, the more depressed and unhappy you may feel. Why? Well, if we swap be good and be happy, we can see that this is a binary, a black and white, all or nothing view of what's really a rather unclear goal. We experience constant failure every day that we measure, and the measure also fluctuates. We find that we have no wins until there's a sudden success, And then as soon as that's passed, we're straight back to failure. If our goal is to be happier, however, we become free to focus on the journey. We're free to look at the process, small improvements, progress in increments, steps, stages. Every tiny step is a small success, and we experience setbacks and obstacles rather than failure. And these smaller wins make the process more enjoyable and more motivating. Now, we can substitute good with any end goal, from happy to happier, from smart to smarter, from rich to richer, perfect to better. And when we think about creating products, we can start and then work on improving, not aiming to create something perfect to begin with, because there's just no such thing. So what happens when we come across an obstacle? Well, expectancy value theory looks at the anticipated, the expected gains. This is where we subconsciously ask, how likely am I to succeed? And how much will I benefit from success? And this is a key question, because we do better when we think we will do better. When our goal is to be good and we come across an unexpected challenge or obstacle, we have lower expectations that we'll succeed. This then means we're less likely to try, less likely to even attempt it, because our success is so closely tied to our self-worth. We won't risk it. And because of that, we're less likely to succeed. Now, we do better when we think we will do better, but similarly, we do worse when we think we'll do worse. When our goal is to get better, we still have the same expectations, lower expectations of success, but it has less impact on our motivation. Even if we might fail, we're still willing to try because our focus is on how much we're able to grow. It means that we see our obstacles, instead of failures, we see them as pebbles in our path rather than something bigger, something we can't escape, something we can't overcome. Now, how do we move from be good to get better? We use anchors. This is where we essentially remind ourselves of aiming to be better throughout the day. We can use mindfulness, we can use atomic habits, or we can anchor ourselves with core values, or what Simon Sinek would call your why. And in terms of identifying this, especially with work or why you came here today, you can answer some simple questions. Why did you come here today? What's brought you to this conference? What is it that you like about what you do? What is it that's important to you at work? And if you take a minute to write down your answers to those questions, and if there's a common theme in what you're writing, or write down a word to summarize those, this gives you a clear idea of what it is that drives you to do what you do. Now, studies have shown that when we anchor ourselves by focusing on our core values, by repeating, by weighing them up, we make better decisions. We come up with better strategies, and we have better responses to setbacks. When we add something like the aim of getting better, then we move ourselves further towards continual personal improvement. Now, let's look at how we approach our goals and our mindset. So thinking back to when you were at school, why did you strive to achieve the results that you wanted to get in school? Was it to seek achievements and praise, or was it because you felt a sense of responsibility or obligation? Was it because you thought you owed it to people? If you're somebody who sought praise and recognition, then you tend to have what's called a promotion focus. If, on the other hand, you did it because you thought you ought to, because you owed it to people, then you tend to have what's called a prevention focus. Now, generally, people with a promotion focus, they take more risks. They tend to have more successes. They also experience a lot more failure. They have the attitude of fail fast or fail forwards. Now, These people are likely to try if there's a high chance of success or a big reward. And if this is you, then you tend to have the underlying view that the right behavior gets rewarded, whereas the wrong behavior gets ignored. Now, on the other hand, the people who have the prevention focus, they tend to take longer on tasks with more perfectionist behavior. They hate the idea of fail fast. But this isn't a bad thing, because perfectionism is what launches rockets at NASA. The underlying thought here that those with a prevention focus operate on is the idea that the wrong behavior gets punished, whereas the right behavior gets ignored. Now, I'd want to draw your attention to this point here, saying motivation decreases with safety. I'm absolutely not suggesting that you should attack people on your team who have a prevention focus so that they feel unsafe. Rather, we can introduce a supported element of discomfort. So agreed deadlines, public accountability, things that we can do to increase the discomfort without introducing threat or shame. For those of you who work in the Agile sphere, you might use user stories. So when you're working towards creating something, say if you were building a website building a website, you would say with a promotion focus, as a user, I want to know that my data will be secure when I visit a site. With a prevention focus, however, you would phrase it slightly differently. I want to know that my data won't be stolen. So safe for the promotion, not stolen for the prevention. Now, it's useful to bear this way of thinking in mind when you're going forwards with any request or proposal. Maybe you're asking for training, maybe you're suggesting a new idea. It's the same information that we're giving. We're just using a subtle shift in our phrasing. And depending on the focus of the person or people that you're speaking to, you might choose to use either a prevention or a promotion focus. And if you're not sure which one is going to fit, then listen to their descriptions. How do they talk? If they have a promotion focus, they're likely to use questions like, what's in it for me? What's in it for the business? What do we get? The focus is things that they might gain. With a prevention focus, however, they'll be asking about what are the risks, what are the issues, what are the costs. The focus with the prevention is on what they might lose. And if they use both, then notice which they ask about more. Now, for just a moment, I want you to imagine you're in a cool, dark, quiet forest. And close your eyes, perhaps. And it's 200,000 or so years ago, 200,000 years ago. So there are wolves, there are bears. And as you stand there in the silence, you hear a twig snap behind you. Now do please open your eyes. The slight feeling that you would have experienced at the thought of a twig snapping is because we have the same brain structure as we had 200,000 years ago, but now we experience different circumstances. Now, instead of fearing bears and wolves, we fear presentations, demonstrations, pitches, appraisals, meetings with our manager, and our fears affect our performance. Now, this is called psychosomatization. This is where our mental state affects our physical state. If I feel slightly unwell, then it helps, then I feel more miserable, more sad. And feeling more miserable or more sad makes me feel more unwell, more ill. And that then in turn affects my thoughts, my feelings. My feelings affect my thoughts affect my feelings, and they in turn affect my thoughts again. Now, the inverse is also true. I'm not saying, not at all, that we can, not suggesting that we can cure all diseases with positive thought or asking the universe. I'm simply saying that we can use psychology to alter our physiology and vice versa. And this is important because our stress response shuts down all higher brain function, leaving in charge of us our inner chimp and the 3 Fs, that is fighting, feeding, and fornication. Now, these are unproductive behaviors at work. And we move into a siege mentality. There's no need for creative thought when we are in survival mode. So how do we move towards this? Well, we can use as if, where we imagine ourselves not being, not pretending, but acting as if we are the ideal person for the situation. I'm not suggesting power posing here. The research is limited and disputed. More, if you imagine yourself in the ideal situation. For me, for example, I use Diana or Wonder Woman. And in a situation where I might feel nervous or unsure of myself, I ask, what would Diana do? So when I was learning, or when I was a very new speaker, the very first time I gave this talk, I was fearful, I was shy, I felt nervous. I didn't think I could do it. I didn't think I was capable. And so I imagined in the same situation, what would Wonder Woman do? And I was able to realize that in that situation, I could be relaxed. I could be confident. I am capable. I can be warm. I can realize I am safe. This is fine. I feel great. And actually, I love being here. Now, what we're doing here is we are harnessing mirror neurons. We are creating a neurological mirror of safety and calm. And our brain responds to this fantasy as if it's physically real. And this happens whether we do something or think about doing something. The same parts of the brain are activated whether we are observing, thinking about, or performing an action. Essentially, we create a link between the sensory input and the usual intention behind that behavior. We use what our subconscious knows about the implications of those actions. And you will have noticed this experience yourself if you've ever seen a pizza advert, or really any food advert, or even if you watch someone drink a glass of water. Now, there's a dark side to visualization, and it's all to do with language. We sometimes use tools to describe what it is that we're creating. We might mock them up. And this gives us a subconscious image of the thing that we are building as completed or achieved. And this has a subconsciously calming effect. It gives our fantasy a direction, but unfortunately, it doesn't motivate action. We need to focus our presentation of our ideas and language instead on the steps that we need to take to achieve the goal. This is giving our subconscious the sense of the thing being incomplete. This is one of the ways that we can introduce some gentle discomfort. It's all to do with phrasing, or more specifically, with grammar. When we describe things, perhaps in the terms of user stories, if you use user stories, but when we describe things using present tense, so I can read current news so that I stay current. I can read current news on the homepage so that I stay current on Agile news. So using the present tense, we give ourselves the idea of the thing as already completed, already built, something that we can already use. Psychologically, we feel more calm. If we shift our language into future tense with a suggestion of some action that we will be able to complete in the future, we aren't able to complete it yet, but when it's built, we will. Then we're focusing on the end game instead of the journey. Then we're focusing on the journey instead of the end game. So we're looking here at the steps that are needed. And we can leave the user can for sprint titles and when we're in the demonstration of the product. We can take it a step further and we can introduce a promotion and a prevention focus. So I want to be able to read news so that I can stay current, or with the prevention focus, if I'm not able to read the news, then I won't be able to stay current. Now, since we're talking about the dark side, let's look at self-sabotage. So you mirror emotions, and the person that you're speaking to mirrors your emotions back to you. This is a subconscious process, and it's what makes the as-if process that we talked about just now, it's what makes that work. But unfortunately, when we sense any kind of hostility, we subconsciously become more hostile. And the problem is that, especially when we're under stress, when we're existing in something like a pandemic or in lockdown, we're much more sensitive to hostility. Even a neutral expression can be judged as hostile. We have limited control over this automatic response. It happens on a subconscious level, and we don't have any say in the matter. Now, this subconscious and automatic response, you might call it your inner voice. It originates from our parents, our caregivers, our peers, our colleagues. And it also comes from every criticism or rejection or failure that we've ever experienced. Sometimes it might show up as imposter syndrome. And it tells you that you're no good. And most of us, if we experience this, we believe it. Now remember that we do better when we think we'll do better. So if we have negative thoughts about something, we have no chance. If we have positive thoughts about our chances of success, we have some chance. Okay, but if your approach is being good and then you come across an obstacle, then you're less likely to try or to succeed. So let's introduce some mental contrasting, where we bring in positive thought plus realism, or you could call it practical pessimism. And this is what gives us our best chance. So let's get a sense of realism. If you're somebody who thinks you can't do this, then question it, take that critic to task. And it's important to do this rather than trying to suppress negative thoughts, because thinking positive backfires. The inner criticism still happens. So instead, we can ask questions of our inner critics so that we are constantly shifting ourselves towards the position of getting better, improving what is, instead of berating ourselves for our failures to create something perfect. Now, Gabriel Oettingen created a model for this called WOOP, Wish, Objective, Obstacle, Plan. And we can practice this for a minute. So begin by asking, why did you come here today? Now, this is very similar to what you asked yourself earlier, to begin looking at your core values. Why did you come here today? And then you can think of a team or a personal goal that fits your values. And you can ask yourself, with this goal in mind, what would a happy outcome look like? Not an endpoint, a first version, an iteration, a step. And what would a happy outcome look like? What would be one positive result of taking this step? Next, you can make it, you can ask yourself, what would be a likely obstacle? What would get in my way of achieving this? And you can make it personal if you want to. What is it in you that stops you? And it's important to identify things that you can change. You could use your critic to help you provide some realism at this point and ask questions of your inner critic to get better. As if we were the ideal team for the job, what steps would you then take to overcome this obstacle? Now, why does this all work? Well, we tell ourselves stories, and because they come from us, we believe them. Frequently, our stories are self-criticisms. I overeat, I smoke, I shout at people, I shouldn't. I don't like change, I should. We berate ourselves for ideals, for shoulds, for oughts. So as a final shift, We can change our sense of identity, but more helpfully. Again, we're taking the weight of our decision-making away from our prefrontal cortex, the decision-making part of our brain, and instead of knowing that we should not or should, and then having to make a decision about that, we change our language from I shouldn't to I don't. I shouldn't smoke to I don't smoke. I shouldn't shout at colleagues in meetings. I don't shout at colleagues. I should welcome change. I should be more flexible. I welcome change. I am flexible. As the famous master said, do or do not. There is no should. So we've looked at how stress events lead to automatic responses, and then this means our behavior reverts to the same responses that we would have had 200,000 years ago. However, with small changes, by shifting our language, we build healthier habits ourselves and in our teams. This then moves us much closer towards achieving our goals. We've spoken today about goals for optimists and pessimists. We've looked at some visualization, and we've talked about how to welcome our inner critic. If you want to do some further reading, I highly recommend these books. And if you want one to start with, just one, begin with Atomic Habits. It is a superb first step. And on that happy note, thank you.